This actually is the last week we will be spending with Isaiah. Next week, Al is going to pull together the messianic prophecies and the servant prophecies as displayed in the book of Matthew. So let's look at where we're going. So there's our schedule. We did the messianic prophecies, did a little background, the messianic prophecies. Al started exploring the servant songs, the first 2 of 4 last week. And then I am going to do the last 2 this week, which are probably more familiar to you. They are typically highlighted during Passion Week. And then next week, Al will pull together the messianic and servant prophecies as seen in Matthew. And then the last week, I am going to take a look at Psalm 22 as a prophecy as well. You probably recall that one begins, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And we hear those words on Jesus' lips. But there's a lot more in there that we also witness at the cross. And maybe unbeknownst to some, it has a happy ending, as does Jesus' story. So we'll look at that. Why? There you go. Hot diggity dogs. Okay. That's a quote that we try to use every week to remind us of the importance of what Isaiah has written. No Old Testament prophet stands closer to Christ's cross than does Isaiah. You're going to get another couple of references. I'd say for my Lenten reading, among other things, I'm reading Calvin's sermons on the 4th of the servant songs, Isaiah 52 and 53. And this is from the translator's introduction. And then you'll get to hear a couple of tidbits from Calvin himself today. And there he is in all his glory, Isaiah. And we're going to look at Isaiah 51 to 11, and then Isaiah 52, 13 to 53, 12. See, I told you we needed to leave the door open and not do anything substantive until 10 o'clock. And so far, so good. All right, a refresher from last week. You could probably tell me, right? Isaiah 42. "Behold my servant whom I uphold, my chosen in whom my soul delights." So first, I assume you talked about his having been chosen, not being named, but chosen. The Spirit of God is upon him, and lots of attention paid to bringing forth justice. To whom? To the nations, everybody. He will not cry aloud or lift up his voice or make it heard in the street. He's not going to be bullying anybody and beating them over the head with his Old Testament scrolls. "A bruised reed he will not break, and a faintly burning wick he will not quench. He will," and here we have it again, "faithfully bring forth justice." And yes, y'all, this is the first substantive slide, so we're all good. All right. "He will not grow faint or be discouraged till he has established," this I think is the 3rd time, "justice in the earth, and the coastlands wait for his law." Here we have a picture of Jesus washing the disciples' feet. I know Al and I have been careful to keep Isaiah in his context, whether it be the 8th century, the 7th century, or the 6th century. But some of what we read we just cannot avoid. In fact, if you look for pictures of, you put in as your search, the verse from Isaiah, and you almost always get pictures of Jesus. And we know why. So the reiterated statement that this person is going to bring justice on the earth, that God's Spirit will be on him, and that his accomplishment of this end will not be through oppression, through browbeating, reminds us of the prophecies of the Messiah, the ones we looked at in the first week that I taught, in Isaiah 9, 11, and we didn't talk about 32, but it's there. So, there we had the servant as king. Remember, we talked about those being sort of royal prophecies with lots of references to the line of David. There we had the servant as king in the messianic prophecies. Here, in the ones we're studying now, we have the king as servant. I think that says it quite well. That's Professor Oswalt in the NIV application commentary on Isaiah, the NIVAC NIV application commentaries. The Old Testament editor is none other than our old buddy, J. Andrew Dearman. So I trust him. So I always like to get the big picture first before we delve into the Isaiah text itself. What's going on? Well, we got two problems that God and his people are having by virtue of their captivity in Babylon. I think Al explained last week that when we moved from those messianic prophecies coming during the time from Ahaz and Hezekiah, now we are in the time of the Babylonian exile, which comes after 586, not in Isaiah's lifetime. And we have, I think in the first week, we mentioned two different schools of thought on that. Al gave you the three-part Isaiah, chapters 1 to 39, 40 to 55, and then 55 to the end, as being by three different authors or groups of authors. The traditional case has been, since the book opens with, this is by Isaiah, that all of it is by Isaiah, and therefore what we're reading during the time of the Babylonian captivity and release is something that Isaiah actually foresaw. That, to me, is not unreasonable. I can't prove it. Literarily, it does look like it fits, the Isaiah text fits into three components, but with God, all things are possible. And this could well be the original Isaiah talking about the problems of the Babylonian captivity. If not, it's somebody who picked up the text after Isaiah 39. So, problem number one. If these people, Israel, are to be God's chosen servants, they need to be set free to live and minister in the land of God's promise. Remember, all the way back to Genesis 12, a verse that to me is one of the pivotal verses in all of our Bible. God, Abraham, I am going to make you a great nation. I'm going to give you land. A little later, I'm going to give you lots of kids. Not because you have earned it or deserve it, or particularly devout people say, oh yes, because Abraham was faithful. No, he hadn't been called to do anything yet. Certainly not sacrifice the son he doesn't yet have. Abraham's just chosen. And it's made clear in Genesis 12, 1 to 3, that Abraham and his descendants have been blessed and will be blessed so that they can be a blessing to the nations. That is the theme throughout the whole Old Testament. That's why God gets so upset when they go off the rails. Hey, you are supposed to be a light to the nations. If you're acting like the nations, you're not doing your job. And so that's the problem we have. If they are going to be a light to the nations, they can't be in Babylonian captivity by virtue of their disobedience. So what are we going to do about that? And I put it in here in two tenses to highlight what I just said. God's anointed, which is what he is in fact called in Isaiah 45, Cyrus of Persia, and I originally wrote, we'll see to that. I'm writing it in terms of prophetic pronouncement by Isaiah, not, and this doesn't mean that I'm disagreeing with Al necessarily, because I don't know the answer. But as he said, yeah, they're able to write about Cyrus because it's already happened. So they know who Cyrus is. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, so either Cyrus will see to their freedom, or he has seen to their freedom, depending on which school of thought you are in with respect to when the middle part of Isaiah, the second part of Isaiah, was written. As you know, Cyrus the Great of Persia, his approach to captivity was and rule was to let people go back to their homeland. He let the Judeans who had been exiled, the best and the brightest, like Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, those folks who had been taken away to Babylon, he lets them go home. He is wise. He's called the Great for a reason. His thinking was, if people go home, if I give them money, which he did, to rebuild their city and their temple, they're going to be a whole lot easier to manage. And they're going to like me. And that tended to work. So Cyrus is going to take care of problem number one. The people will be back in their land. They're still going to have Cyrus, a Persian, as their king, not someone from the line of David. So we're not yet fully restored, but they are restored to the land and their home and their temple, which they're going to rebuild. The second problem, which is a bigger one, what is to be done about the sin that got the people into this spot in the first place? The Old Testament is very clear when they are reflecting on the Babylonian captivity, it's because we screwed up. Okay, we wandered, we were not obeying God. That's why this calamity has befallen us. So what are we going to do about that? Cyrus can free us from physical captivity in Babylon, but he can't do anything about our sin. So the passage, that's to set up the passages for today. They provide the solution. The one who will deliver them from captivity to sin, a much more serious problem than captivity to Nebuchadnezzar or Cyrus, is the servant of the Lord, who we first met. That's why I went back and went over Isaiah 42 again. We first meet that servant in Isaiah 42, and I like this line from Professor Oswalt again. His servanthood will make possible theirs. He will free them to be the light to the nation, to be the servants of God that they were called to be. And don't miss the last two words. The servant makes possible our servanthood as well. Let's take a look. Do we have a volunteer reader so you don't have to hear from me the whole time? This is going to be on about 4 slides.
I'll do it.
Go for it.
Thus says the Lord, where is your mother's certificate of divorce with which I sent her away? Or which of my creditors is it to whom I have sold you? Behold, for your iniquities you were sold, and for your transgressions your mother was sent away.
Okay, so just a quick interruption. There we have, you got sent packing because you weren't obeying. Okay, go ahead, Jim.
Why, when I come, was there no man? Why, when I called, was there no one to answer? Is my hand shortened that it cannot redeem? Or have I no power to deliver? Behold my rebuke, I dry up the sea. By my rebuke, I dry up the sea. I make the rivers a desert. Their fish stink for lack of water and die of thirst. I clothe the heavens with blackness and make sackcloth their covering. But the Lord God helps me. Therefore I have not been disgraced. Therefore I have set my face like a flint, and I know that I shall not be put to shame. He who vindicates me is near. Who will contend with me? Let us stand up together. Who is my adversary? Let him come near to me. Behold, the Lord God helps me. Who will declare me guilty? Behold, all of them will wear out like a garment. The moth will eat them up.
Okay, we have a shift in gears. This is probably the servant speaking.
Who among you fears the Lord and obeys the voice of his servant? Let him who walks in darkness and has no light trust in the name of the Lord and rely on his God. Behold, all you who kindle a fire, who equip yourselves with burning torches, walk by the light of your fire and by the torches that you have kindled. This you have from my hand. You shall lie down in torment.
Okay, you walk by your own light, it isn't going to end well. And I always think back to Adam and Eve and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You know, we so often say, well, we fell into sin because they were disobedient. Indeed, they were. But the deeper issue is they were seeking to learn for themselves good and evil. And then God knows that when we take that responsibility upon ourselves and don't look to Him for what is right and what is wrong, we're going to make wrong choices. We will not be able to decide well what is good and what is evil, and that's what we have here. Walk by the light of your own fire, you're going to lie down in torment. So now let's take a look. We can bounce back if you want to see the text itself, but we have it in basically three chunks. In the first one, God challenges the despondency of His people. They are not well. They know they are being punished. They feel abandoned, but He says it was for your iniquities that you were sold. Okay, this was your fault. You did not obey. And then the verses 4 through 9, we find this servant who is suffering for others. I gave my back to those who strike and my cheeks to those who pull out my beard. That hurts. The servant did not suffer because he was guilty, but because others were guilty. And we find that for that behavior, for his innocence, God's going to vindicate him. That's what it says. And in verses 10 to 11, we get two possible responses to the servant. The servant has spoken. We either fear the Lord and obey the voice of the servant, or, as I was saying, we walk by the light of our own wisdom and lie down in torment. Things do not turn out well. Some other observations about 1 through 11. We saw, as I mentioned, it is the servant speaking in the first person in that middle section, 4 through 9. And I know, see, you're entitled to differences of opinion in here. There are times, in fact, Israel is identified as the servant in at least one of the passages that Al talked about last week, and it's easy to see how it would be. I think now that is not going to be the case, because the servant can't be the nation of Israel. They didn't suffer. They were not suffering because they obeyed, but because they rebelled. So the statements about the servant suffering for others, where he was innocent and others transgressed and committed iniquities, that says our servant cannot be Israel. We learn that the servant will reveal God through speech. His ears have been opened, that was verse 5. His tongue has been taught how to sustain with a word him who is weary. And certainly we're going to see that in the one that we know as the servant king. Declaring his message will bring about abuse, pulling out his beard, among other things. I think that is symbolic of all the abuse that this servant is going to suffer. But the servant will bear it because God will vindicate him in the end. We get that representation in verses 7 to 9 also. And finally, those last couple of verses, we're not supposed to just say, wow, what a great guy. The servant is not simply to be admired or wondered at. How does he do this? How does he put up with this? But he is to be obeyed. Now we come to the one you probably know best of all. It goes from 52:13. There's only 3 verses in chapter 52 through 53:12. He was pierced for our transgressions is one of the memorable lines from that part of Isaiah. This passage is frequently quoted in the New Testament. In fact, at length in Acts chapter 8, verses 26 to 40. We're going to get back to that at the end. Anybody remember what's going on in Acts 8, 26 to 40? One of the great coinkydinks, which is not a coincidence, one of the great examples of God's sovereign plan. It's where we have an Ethiopian eunuch who has come to Jerusalem with his queen to worship. And he's reading this from the prophet Isaiah, and he says, what the heck? What's the heck this mean? And our man Philip is there to explain it to him. And we're going to look at that. All right, in 52 to 53, we get a physical description in some way, specific ways, of the servant. And this part of Isaiah explains how the Holy One can bless these sinful people. Remember, that's our big problem. What are we going to do about the people's captivity to sin? What are we going to do about our captivity to sin? And the way that happens is the suffering servant removes the guilt by his sacrifice. I know this is great. Al last week got to say this. I get to say it. Pay attention to the pronouns. And it's not so that we don't offend people who are choosy about their pronouns. It's you want to be able to follow the who's talking. And I is the Lord. He is the servant. We, us, are the witnesses, the people. Probably the believing remnant of Israel. Again, the servant can't be Israel if the we and us are going to be the witnesses. It's Israel is not the he or the I. From another lovely book, anybody have the Bible Speaks Today series? It was edited by John Stott. It's great. Whole collection of nice little paperbacks on every book in the Bible by good scholars. Anyway, this is from Barry Webb, The Message of Isaiah. This fourth song is the most elaborate and poignant of them all. It is the jewel in the crown of Isaiah's theology, the focal point of his vision. That's a pretty nice thing to have said about your chapters 52 and 53. And we're going to see it is divided into 5 stanzas. The first, which is the end of chapter 52, God's wisdom is revealed. The second, we are going to talk about the servant being despised and rejected. You'll remember that from Passion Week sermons, from Handel's Messiah. We are healed by his wounds. For reading purposes today, the King James Version is not perfect. A couple reasons. It was written in 17th century English, so it's kind of hard to follow sometimes. And we have had subsequent manuscript discoveries that say there needed to be some tweaking done in the King James Version. If you're not familiar with that, I've had people say, oh, the NIV is terrible because it takes stuff out. I said, no, what it takes out was never in there in the first place. It was added over the centuries, and the King James translators wouldn't have known that because the older manuscripts hadn't been discovered. But anyway, this is one place where I go to stick with the King James, not using it here, but I got to make sure you know. By his stripes we are healed. You have probably all heard that. But healed by his wounds is the more common modern translation. Then we're going to see that the one who is suffering is not only sinless, but remains silent. And then finally, for all of that, he will be crowned with glory and honor. And again, we're talking about this in the time of Isaiah, but you can't read this and not go, I know who that is. And I agree with Al that when this was written and the people it was written to, they don't go, oh, that's Jesus of Nazareth, because there is no such incarnate word yet. But it's not just that the church looked at that and said, oh, yeah, that's Jesus. It's getting pretty obvious, I think. So let's look at these stanzas by stanza. Another reader, or Jim can keep on trucking?
I'll do it.
Yeah, my man.
Behold, my servant shall act wisely. He shall be high and lifted up and shall be exalted. As many were astonished at you, his appearance was so marred beyond human semblance, and his form beyond that of the children of mankind. So shall he sprinkle many nations. Kings shall shut their mouths because of him. For that which has not been told them they see, and that which they have not heard they understood.
I think one of my favorite illustrations is coming up. Well, shut my mouth. Whose mouths are going to be shut? I go back. Kings shall shut their mouths because of him. Why do we think that is? It says, for that which has not been told them, they see. What are they seeing? That the one who reigns supreme is not at all like the way the world reigns supreme. And that which they have not heard, they understand. And somebody's going to go, oh, well, shut my mouth. All right. So we are told in this stanza that the servant, he appears repulsive, but he will be exalted right out of the box. And I from one of Calvin's sermons that I was reading on I like it here. What is signified here is that although our Lord performed miracles which bore witness to his divine powers, he was nevertheless marred so that unbelievers could make no sense of it at all. Like the kings. Wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. And I also read that to say if this guy had looked like Superman, if this Jesus had looked, or like Brad Pitt or something like that, it'd be easy to be attracted to him, and God didn't want it that way. God wanted us attracted, and similarly, not just the miracles. That's what Calvin's saying. Not just through the miracles, and in fact, because he was marred, I think it made it more difficult for people to accept him other than on his own terms. And the servant's going to sprinkle many nations. That's a nice image. Moses was told to sprinkle blood on Aaron and his sons and his garments to purify them back in Exodus. So the servant is going to sprinkle the nations. Again, we're talking about the nations, not just Israel. And the kings representing the nations will be awed by his humiliation on the one hand and his glory on the other. That's when they're going to say, well, shut my mouth. How can that be? How can this fairly unattractive, maybe even repellent looking person be glorified? Who takes a beating, be glorified? All right. Yes, please.
So those stanzas about his being marred or
Yes.
disfigured or something,
Yes.
I don't know if that applies to after he was arrested and beat up, or whether, as far as I know in the New Testament, there's no description of him that says he stood out as being excessively ugly or
Correct.
excessively
I think
marred.
that's right. But I think it's saying two things. One, yes, he will be marred, he will be wounded. But I think also there is nothing particularly attractive about it. Not particularly ugly, but nothing particularly. I think that's a good point. He's not going to stand out by his physical features in any way, and it's only going to get worse. I think. No, good point. Okay, Jim, rock on. Going into the second stanza, beginning chapter 53.
Who has believed what he has heard from us? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he grew up before him like a young plant, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should desire him.
And I think that is referring to him before the passion. Go ahead.
He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and as one from whom men hide their faces. He was despised, and we esteemed him not.
What are we learning here? The servant lives in rejection. Unbelief is natural. And going back to Jim and my discussion a minute ago, because he's an obscure, sort of outwardly unimpressive person. The witnesses, those who are speaking here, believe he's shown promise at first, right? Like a dead plant come to life. a young shoot coming out of the ground. Okay. But the more he grew, the less impressive he became. And even the witnesses, the believing remnant of Israel, turned their faces away. Look at that last verse. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, and as one from whom men hide their faces. Third stanza, healed by his wounds or his stripes, the lashes on his back.
Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray.
We like sheep, I guess.
All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all.
Okay, I mean, this is the heart of it. The substitutionary atonement. Oh, look, I agree with whoever wrote this. I did. The heart of the passage. The servant bears the sins of others, but he was innocent. These witnesses, that believing remnant or obedient remnant, arrive at a new understanding. And don't miss this. God, and I wrote, yes, God, who crushed the servant? Let's make sure we see that. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But the servant wasn't crushed because he deserved it. They were the ones who deserved suffering and death. The repetition of that our emphasizes that the servant died in our place. He has borne our griefs, our sorrows, our transgressions, our iniquities. You get it? With his wounds we are healed. But there's good news. Peace with God, the healing of this broken relationship, is secured by the servant's death. But at what a tremendous cost. Pierced, crushed, very harsh words, emphasize the cost of our salvation. And notice, all contributed to his pain. Fourth stanza.
He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth, like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. And as for his generation, who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living, stricken for the transgressions of my people.
Stricken for the transgression of my people. Okay, go ahead.
And they made his grave with the wicked and with a rich man in his death, although he had done no violence and there was no deceit in his mouth.
All right, that's making it plain. For whom did he suffer? For us. Why did he suffer? Because had he done anything wrong? No. He had done no violence. There was no deceit. He wasn't a liar or a cheat or an oppressor. But he was cut out of the land of the living. When you think about it, it means he's not going to have a family. This passage is likely Isaiah himself. The servant died, and there is one of my favorite. It's a small piece of the Ghent altarpiece in Ghent, Belgium. The adoration of the mystic lamb. I love that piece of art. There are, if you've got an expanded view, all the people on their knees celebrating the lamb whose blood is being poured out. Yes?
Is that the one that the monument man saved?
Mm-hmm. The monument's been saved a lot of pieces of art. The two that are featured in the movie are the Bruges Madonna and the Ghent altarpiece. Yep. Who knew he was stricken for the transgression of my people? That is a surprise to people. And let me ask you all what you think about this. It says the servant's grave was with the wicked and with a rich man. What does that make you think of, Isaac?
Well, it makes you think of the person who provided the
Joseph.
grave.
Joseph of Arimathea. But what about the wicked? That one's easier.
That's easier.
The ones on the cross on either side. Some commentators will say, actually here, rich is meant to be derogatory, that rich people thought they were better than others. So either way, he's buried with people who are not at all like him. I don't read it that way because of the last question I'm asking here. Is the servant's work over? Is he done? He's dead. He's buried with the wicked and a rich man. Is God's final verdict a mix of honor, buried with the rich man, and dishonor, grave was with the wicked? Which is it going to be? Well, let's find out.
Yet it was the will of the Lord to crush him. He has put him to grief. When his soul makes an offering for guilt, he shall see his offspring. He shall prolong his days. The will of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. Out of the anguish of his soul he shall see and be satisfied. By his knowledge shall the righteous one, my servant, make many to be accounted righteous, and he shall bear their iniquities. Therefore I will divide him a portion with the many, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong. Because he poured out his soul to death, and was numbered with the transgressors, yet he bore the sin of many, and makes intercession for the transgressors.
Whoever this is, it can't be a sinner. That's being made clear. And remember I said, it was said he was cut off from the living. He's not going to have a family. Actually, he's going to have a family. Who's the family? Yep, the church. Yep. He shall see his offspring. That's us. He shall prolong his days, crowned with glory and honor, suffering and glory. My little picture there, the God of paradox. It's both. And Al's going to emphasize that next week. The servant was crushed, but victorious. And both are by the will of God. So we're emphasizing, Isaiah's prophecy is emphasizing God's sovereign power. He was crushed for our iniquities by God, but he's also going to be raised up and glorified by God. And notice, remember there was a couple of references to his soul. Now, we ought not be believers in sort of a bifurcated human being. We are not part soul and part body. We are, as one of my theology professors taught, embodied souls and besouled bodies. We are one. We are one. And all of him suffered is what I think this is telling. When his soul makes an offering for guilt. So he is suffering body and soul. And his death was not the end of his career. Nope. He shall see his offspring. And then we get a therefore. Therefores are always good, right? Or at least good signposts. Sometimes the therefore tells us bad things. But here, the servant's sacrificial death explains his subsequent glory. It's because he did what he did that he will be glorified. And eternal blessings for those who believe in him. This takes us all the way to Revelation. In Revelation chapter 5, when John is at the throne room of heaven with God, and they have the scroll that is going to tell us how everything is going to play out. But nobody is found worthy to open the scroll. And John starts to cry. And then he's told, it's okay. The Lion of the tribe of Judah, okay, the powerful one, Lion of tribe of Judah comes from the blessing given to, at the end of, Genesis 49, I think, yes. Judah, you will be like the cub of a lion. we have the image of the lion, and John looks up, and you know what he sees. Does he see a roaring lion? He sees a lamb looking as if it had been slain. I mean, to me, and sadly, we've had, as Charlotte was telling me, she went to 2 funerals within 3-4 days. I was in Houston and missed Ron Greenings, who we've known since we've been coming here, and Mary Alloway, same thing. And so I want to make sure that at my funeral, so y'all are witnesses, Revelation 5 gets read, because I think that is the heart of the story. The one who is the lion, who has all power and might, gives it up like a slaughtered lamb. And then what do they sing? They sing a song of praise, and how does it end? And they all fell down. I mean, that's all you can do when you realize the paradox of suffering and glory. And then finally, the one who was despised takes the place of a conqueror. Look at the end. That's what conquerors do, right? I will divide him a portion with the many. He'll divide the spoil with the strong because he poured out his soul to death. It's because of that sacrificial offering that the servant has made that he will win. The last word. This is again from Professor Oswalt's commentary. As early as Philip's encounter with the Ethiopian eunuch, which we mentioned before, it has been normal for Christians to understand that Jesus Christ is the servant about whom Isaiah is speaking. Despite myriad attempts to find a figure in 6th century BC who might be the referent in this passage, none has been successful. And there he's referring specifically to that last, the 4th servant song. Note my foot. This cracks me up. Whoever people have said, well, it can't, not necessarily Jesus, it must be somebody from Isaiah's time. He says nobody's ever been able to make a convincing case of that. And then Calvin in a sermon, this is coming from the pulpit. Therefore, that devil Servetus, who Calvin and his government in Geneva put to death, a great blot on our great theologian's character. Therefore, that devil Servetus, who was executed here, he's preaching in Geneva, is even more accursed because he falsified and corrupted the Bible by maintaining that this prophecy was about Cyrus, a heathen and idolater. Don't hear that from the pulpit too much these days. So, better just to have your research not be verifiable than to be executed. He was executed for other alleged heresies, but obviously this one stuck with Calvin. So by contrast, where we can't really find a contemporary figure, the congruence with Jesus' life is remarkable. So remarkable that those who deny the possibility of predictive prophecy, he can't be talking about somebody coming in 600 years. Yes, he can. Have had to say that Jesus consciously modeled himself on Isaiah's servant to make it appear that he was the fulfillment of that prophecy. This from a man on whose lips was no deceit, we are told in Isaiah. We know, when we read the story of the triumphal entry on what we call Palm Sunday, Jesus may very well have chosen to come in on a donkey because of the Old Testament echo. He sure didn't do everything. I don't think he can make the case that he had a copy of Isaiah and said, here's my script. And that's what Oswald's saying. When you read it, and again, we are reading it through Christian lenses, but it is hard to ignore that this sure sounds like Jesus of Nazareth. And it sure wouldn't be the case that he took all that on as a really good acting job. So I said that was the last word, and so it is. Except for your words. What words have you? Questions? Yes.
I'm one of the dissenters
Of what?
of prediction.
Oh, okay.
My former church, and I was sometimes called the heretic.
We won't call
The appointed heretic. Anyway, it doesn't have to be Jesus taking on purposely taking on this role, but the people who were writing after him, the gospel writers, looking back and seeing.
Yeah, but they didn't see anybody else doing it. That would be my response.
Well, okay, but
Oh, yeah, no question that it is the Christian tradition. That's what Al's going to talk about next week in Matthew, that put it all together. It had not been put together prior to that time. If so, we don't have any record of it. But it's not like there were other contenders. But that one, yeah.
Are today's Jews who have not accepted Christ still looking for a Messiah, or is that just kind of?
For most, I think that has kind of been spiritualized. Some are. And I can't remember the specific movements, but there was a rabbi in Brooklyn whose name I forget, that people rallied around 50 years ago or something. But I think for the most part it has been spiritualized. It's not a real person coming. That they've been waiting a long
Looking
time.
for a spiritual movement?
I mean, the whole point is, God is going to bring everything back together again. Well, we are actually right on time. But I don't have to be that, yeah.